Oh, good, you're here. Come on. This is the centre of performance. Whenever there's a top performance in New Zealand, it all comes from here. That's Lisa Carrington. She's been doing that for days. That's the boy who got the hole-in-one in Taupo. Oh, he did it again. Hey, Finn, how's the performance going?
Top tier.
Nice. This is our Generate room. In here, you'll find our top performers helping Kiwis maximise their KiwiSaver investments. Get in here, Finn. Maximise.
Right,
Generate. Putting performance first.
First of all, I'd like to bring a new friend of mine into the studio. So there was where we're recording this is my PodLab studio, and we had a group in for a tour the other week from Orewa College, and I met this young kid called Henry Blakeman, who is, I think he's 12, maybe 13 years old, and he's into politics. So I thought I'd bring him in to ask some of the hard-hitting political questions before we get into the chat. Yeah. David Seymour, are you ready?
Absolutely. I think so. We'll see how hard-hitting this guy is.
It would be so much better if his name was Goliath, for the sake of this segment. David versus Goliath.
I'm just trying to think who's the Goliath and who's the David in this. I feel I may be about to get stoned.
David Seymour, meet Henry Blakeman.
Hi, Henry. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
You too.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
That's good.
Keen to hear what you've got to say or ask.
Yeah, well, I've heard a little bit about you. You've been in the news quite a lot.
Once or twice. Out of interest, where do you get information about politics? Do you online or on the news, on TV?
I mostly watch the news at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
So any of the stuff that I'm getting from politics, I usually get from there. My parents will, from time to time, cut in with things that they've heard on the news, but we tend to stay a bit away from debates in our house.
Is there a reason for that?
It can get quite heated.
Really?
Yeah. Because I come from quite a unique household where one parent is left-wing and one parent is right-wing, which is getting rarer and rarer, I think. But it's good to expose me to both opinions, because especially as a young person and my brain's still developing, if I'm only exposed to one set of political ideals, then I'll never accept the other side of it.
I think you should have got this guy on. Like you said, no.
I might leave.
Well, that's really, really interesting. And when you say that there's fewer parents who have opposing views, is that did you read that somewhere, or what is that really true?
I think I've experienced personally a lot of people who are together who have similar views in politics. So I won't name names, but one of my teachers, them and their partner are both the same views on politics. Okay. And I think a lot of people I've met in their relationships have been like that.
It's kind of what they call an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Did you have some questions? Or?
Yeah. So one of the main things I wanted to talk to you about is lowering the voting age.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for younger people to have their say in Parliament, because from, I believe it's 14, you can start legally working, and when you work you have a taxable income, and the government takes that tax money and does whatever it is they want to do with it. But if they're taking your money and you didn't get to choose how they're spending it, I don't see that as fair.
So no taxation without representation?
No.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's funny. My niece occasionally emails me about political stuff, and she was having an argument with my sister-in-law, her mum, about whether she could work, and she wanted to know at what age are you allowed to work. And I was a bit surprised, so I looked up the law, and there's actually no restrictions on children working at any age. And there's also, below a certain age, I think it's about 12, there's also no minimum wage. So if that's true, and children can work at any age, is it possible that we should put the voting age down to 0?
Yeah. Well, I think the voting age will always be there. It's always been a guideline. And I don't think there would be a democracy in the world or history that has ever not had a voting age. And a lot of people say it's about maturity, but in reality, there are a lot of people aged 21, 20 that are less mature than some 16-year-olds. And definitely the people that I've met in my life, there are a lot of 16, 17-year-olds that are way more politically mature than you'd expect.
Yeah, I'd go further. I've met one or two people who actually elected to Parliament who are less mature than than some 15 and 16-year-olds. So, look, I agree with you that there's got to be a line.
Yeah.
Because I think if you said, 4-year-olds can vote, it would really just be their parents getting an extra vote.
Yeah.
And then the question is, where should the line be drawn? Wherever you draw it, there'll be some people who are under the line and really capable, and some people who are over the line and probably less capable than people who are under the line. So it's just down to an argument of, should it be 21 like it was in the past? Should it be 18 like it is now? Should it be 16 like some people say? I mean, what makes you say, are you saying 16 or?
Yes, I'd like it to be lowered to 16. One of the main reasons is because I turned 17 on the year of an election.
Oh,
so
self-interest.
I'll miss out by 1 year. But I think they've just in the UK changed it down to 16, and our parliament is based off of the Westminster system. So if they're changing it, why shouldn't we change it as well?
Well, I guess the UK does make mistakes sometimes. Look, I mean, I just come down and say, well, there's an argument for 16, there's an argument for 18, there's an argument for 20 if you want to make it. I've just never quite been persuaded that 16 is a better age than 18. And the reason that I don't favour changing it, for one thing, it's better if the electoral rules don't change frequently. And the reason I think that is that if the electoral rules are the same, then people don't worry about the rules, they worry about the policies. And that I think is an advantage. And also, the way I look at it, the people who are mostly pushing for the voting age to be lowered are people that want higher taxes and more government spending, because while your point is absolutely correct, you can pay tax from 14 and there should be no taxation without representation. I agree with that, but we've got that even at 16. I believe that having another 100,000 people who vote but mostly don't work and mostly don't pay tax will mean that we get bigger government over time. And so some people will say that's an unfair argument, but that's one of the arguments I make for it staying at 18.
Okay, well, if you're talking about having a bigger government, from the research I've done, one of ACT's main policies is having a smaller government. Could you give me your reasoning behind having a government of less size?
Yeah, I just look at the decisions. I mean, humans are social creatures. We are always trying to do our own thing, but we inevitably come back to wanting to do stuff with other people. Then the question is, well, how do you organise people to cooperate? And one way is just social informal networks, your family, your sports club, your friendship group, and so on. And that works really well because people can do a lot of stuff fast, but they don't need to, give each other a receipt or a payment or whatever. So it's quite good in that way. But if you want to do sort of bigger stuff like make a jumbo jet, then you need businesses. We need people with contracts and money, and businesses can do really good big things faster, but they sometimes lack a bit of the compassion and so on. And then there's another way of doing things, which is government, where you make laws and actually force everybody to behave the same way. Everyone must follow this law, not just people in this family, not just people that choose this business, but everybody. Now, all of those things have good sides and bad sides, but in my view, at the moment, we try and do too much stuff through government. We tax too much, we make too many rules, and it's led to enormous frustration. People have basically been told for the last 80 years, you give me all of your money, or about a third to half your money in taxes, we'll make the problems go away. We'll make sure people have a house and an education and stay healthy and don't end up dependent on welfare. And actually, people paid all the taxes for the last 80 years, but the problems haven't gone away. So I would argue that, just start with the three ways of organising people, sort of social, family, civil society, business and government. And I would argue that government does too much, people are very frustrated with it, and we should try and put the pendulum back the other way.
But aren't you a bit worried that people will be unrepresented? I mean, 120 people that get to sit in Parliament out of 5 million people is a small fraction as it is. But if you have a smaller government, aren't you a little concerned that some people won't get represented at all?
Well, I would be, but just to be clear what I'm talking about, when I talk about a smaller government, I don't mean a smaller parliament. I think it is important to have a House of Representatives of parliamentarians, but that's quite different from the ministers, the Prime Minister, the ministers and the government departments. That's the government. And one way I always think about it is if you go to the US, you can walk along the National Mall there, and they've got the White House, and then they've got the Congress, and then they've got the Supreme Court, and the government and the Parliament, if you like, are separate, and so are the courts. Here, we've got one Parliament, and the government, the Prime Minister and his ministers, sit amongst the parliamentarians. So it sort of seems like it's all the same thing, but it's not. And so I'm talking about, a smaller bureaucracy. I'm talking about less government spending. I'm talking about less rules and regulations. But I still think that the people should have representatives to speak for them in the Parliament, and the same number as we have now, which is what you're saying, which I think you're right.
Okay, so do you think we should have a smaller government by separating the government and the House of Representatives, or is that what you're saying?
I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just saying that the number of ministers could be smaller. So you could still have 120 MPs, but right now a quarter of them are ministers. In the past, instead of having 30 ministers, we had 16 or 18. So we could have fewer MPs that are ministers. We could have fewer government departments. At the moment, we've got about 46 departments. Other countries around the world have half that, and they still manage to function. So you could keep the Parliament the same size, shrink the ministers and the ministries, and be better off.
Okay, well, you talked a bit about lowering taxes, but that seems to be one of the government's main points to solve the cost of living crisis. Is there anything else you're doing at the moment that is helping Kiwis to make it through?
Sure. I mean, I look at the thing that we're recording this today. I just announced that we're going to take a look at the 30 different sets of rules for labelling. Because if you want to sell a medicine in a chemist shop, a building material in a building supply place, an insecticide or something in a farm place like RD1, or if you want to put food on the shelves of a supermarket, all of those things have different rules for how they should be labelled in New Zealand. And often there'll be things that are allowed to be sold in New Zealand, but you can't take the same thing off the shelf and put it in a New Zealand supermarket because the rules are different. Now, what I'm saying is if something could be sold in Australia, it should be sold here. And if we did that, then there'd be more products that New Zealanders could choose from, and prices probably come down with more choice and competition. So that's just one little example of where we're trying to actually get rid of the red tape so that people can do better.
Okay, and I wanted to ask about a specific product, and I'm sure the government has heard this a lot, but I wanted to ask a bit about butter. Now, we've recently had a bit of controversy on Fonterra, and in our family we have a small business, and how do you think that you would be able to lower the price of butter?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I don't think that the government can lower the price of butter because the price is set by the price that farmers are getting on the global dairy trade, and that is influenced by how much butter is produced, say, in places like Europe. If they're producing less, then they've got less, they'll pay more to import butter from New Zealand. That pushes the price up. The second thing is if you look at what the supermarkets are doing, they're actually selling for less than they're getting it for right now. I mean, they're taking a loss for the most part on selling butter. So, this price is influenced by things that the New Zealand government could control. But if we start setting the price for butter, then it's what else are we going to do? People expect us to set every price. I mean, we don't know what to set it at. Okay. So I think what's interesting is that farmers in New Zealand are very innovative. They're on top of their game. They're selling something the world wants. The rest of New Zealand is struggling to afford it. So my answer is this is not a problem with the price of butter. This is a problem with one industry being at the forefront of the world and the rest of New Zealand struggling to afford the prices that they're getting.
Okay. I want to move back a bit. We were talking about Parliament, but I wanted to ask a little bit about MMP. Specifically, people talk about in politics the tail wagging the dog and saying that the Greens or Te Pāti Māori could control Labour the same way that ACT and New Zealand First could control National. And I wanted to ask a bit about how you managed to go into a coalition government and still stand strong with your beliefs but compromise.
I had a political mentor a long time ago when I worked in Canada. His name was Preston Manning, and a lot of people said he was the best Prime Minister Canada never had. He started a party from nothing, became the leader of the opposition there. Anyway, Preston said, look, all politics is ultimately about people managing to live together without physical fighting. So that is the business. Do we get everything we want? No. I mean, New Zealand would be a different place if ACT got more of its policies through. But is the government different because we're there? Yeah, absolutely. We're saving more money, we're spending less, we're getting rid of more red tape. I think we're a lot stronger on equal rights regardless of your ancestry. There's a bunch of things where we can say we've moved the dial from where it would otherwise be. And that's just the business,
Yeah. So you talked about having a political mentor in Canada. Could you describe to us, well, one, what you did before politics, and two, how you got into politics and managed to become the party leader you are today who's in government?
Yeah, so I all my life wanted to be an electrical engineer. I had an experience that you will have quite soon. I was looking at my option lines, which subjects I would take at high school, and I decided that I wanted to do languages and history because I thought they'd be interesting. So I took this plan to my mum, and long story short, I graduated in physics, chemistry, calc, stats, and English. The only reason I did English instead of biology is English was compulsory then. So I was steered very strongly towards a scientific career. I did electrical engineering, and I started working out doing that. But at that point, I'd already been bitten by a bug. And it started when I was in year 12. It was my last year of high school. The NCEA was being introduced, and I watched the principal of my high school, a guy called John Morris, publicly fight with Trevor Mallard, who was the education minister. And Trevor had this big battle and won, but 25 years later, the government is getting rid of the NCEA, and John won. Now, I was sitting there as a kid, and I thought, the principal's right, the government's right, but how can the principal say the government's wrong? And I looked into it, and I found out the government's wrong quite often. In fact, probably more often than not, and that's really what got me interested in politics. I suddenly decided that if I'm going to do something with my life, there's no shortage of politicians out there who promise to tax someone else's money, give it to you, or take someone else's freedom by making a rule to make them do what you want. And I just came to the conclusion that freedom is what works. All through history, it's free people that have made the breakthroughs. And I would go into politics to fight for freedom instead of taxing someone else's money. And that from there, I just kept going.
Yeah. Well, you talked about NCEA. So as a year 8 this year, I will be one of the students that will have never earned NCEA credits from the previous system, and I'll only be doing the A&E grading that the government's introduced now. How do you as a government aim to improve my schooling and improve my qualifications by changing the system?
Well, I just want to start by saying NCEA can be a good system. If you choose hard credits and apply yourself, you could do very well with NCEA. I think where NCEA has gone wrong is exactly where John Morris back in the day said it would, is that it creates too many options and pathways to avoid the hard work and actually make life too easy. And people say, how can life be too easy? Well, actually, I think you've got to have a series of challenges where you say, this is the curriculum, you've got to learn it, you've got to sit the test, and then we're going to give you a percentage. And, that may be hard, but it's better to have a series of small and increasingly large challenges as you grow up, because when you're an adult, suddenly you get some big challenges, and if you hadn't had one before, you're in trouble. So NCEA can work, and I don't want to take anything away from those students out there who have or are doing NCEA. But we're going to say, look, this is the stuff you need to learn. There will be a test. You've got to pass it. And I think that is going to be good for the amount of knowledge you pick up. And it's also going to be good for young people being ready to face more of life's challenges.
Okay. Well, I've heard some students saying that they're worried about what their qualifications with NCEA will mean. So Year 12 and 13 students who are doing NCEA right now, once they graduate and the new system changes over fully, how will their credits benefit them in later life to find a job when they become invalid with the new system? Well, not invalid, but yeah.
Well, you're right. They won't become invalid. That's true. I think that there will be some people that have a negative view of NCEA, but ultimately, if you're an employer or someone who's letting people into a university or trade course, you're sitting there saying, I need to get the best people. If NCEA is the information I have, then I will use that to assess whether I want to employ or put someone into a course. So what I'd say to those people is, is the new thing better or worse? Probably depends on the work you put in. Will you still have prospects, and will people use the information they have about you from the course that you did at your time in history? Yeah, they will.
Okay. I wanted to move back to one of your previous statements where you said that if ACT was the main party in government, a lot of things would have changed. What's on your priority list? What is the biggest thing that you would want to change if you suddenly became the biggest party in New Zealand?
I think at the heart of the frustrations people have with New Zealand right now is that we have lost the pioneering spirit that created this country. I look at my own history. Some of my ancestors came here on a waka 800 years ago. Others came in a sailing ship 120, 130 years ago. Others, not in my family, but certainly in my circle of friends, have arrived in New Zealand just in the last few years. That's our history. We're people that move a long way to a pretty remote place, pretty out there place, to try and get a better life. And that means that you're someone who's prepared to take action, to try and give your kids a better tomorrow by taking a risk today. And I just feel like we've lost that spirit in New Zealand. Everyone's worried about, how do people feel? Is it safe? What if? We've got a million road cones to make sure that nothing goes wrong, is kind of the symbol of it, right?
Yeah.
And I just I want to see a New Zealand where we are a lot more prepared to take risks, be rewarded, not pull people down with tall poppy. We're not focused on all the little differences between us. We're focused on the fact that we're all pioneers who came here, or children of pioneers who came here. That's the kind of New Zealand that can solve problems. And it's the New Zealand that a lot of people like. It's, Sir Edmund Hillary climbs Everest. It's Kate Shepherd first in the world. It's Rutherford splits the atom. These are the kind of stories we like to tell about ourselves. So what does that look like when it comes to policies? Well, it's a smaller bureaucracy. It's less rules and regulations. It's less tax, but it's also being tough on crime, because you don't want to spend your life building up a shop and have someone walk in and take it away. It's also saying, look, if you ever find yourself as a sole parent or you really can't get a job, there'll be welfare there for you. But at the moment, 1 out of every 6 at working age New Zealanders is on a benefit, and I just refuse to believe that 1 in 6 people can't work. So we need to start putting some obligations and some time limits on welfare, and we also need to make it desperately, when we talk about red tape, make it easier to build a home, because if the next generation can build a home, things are going to work out okay. People say, right, here's the deal. I sit my exams, I do my work, save my money, I buy a place, I can have a good life, a stable life. Have a family if that's what I want. Whereas when people say, I've done everything right, but I'll always be a tenant in my own country, then people get very upset. So more opportunity to harness that pioneering spirit and make the most of our time on earth, which involves a little bit of risk, but also a lot more reward.
Okay.
Jeez, he's smart, isn't he?
He is. I know.
Were you like that? I'd imagine you would have been like a nerdy, or politically.
Well, I was nerdy, but I wasn't that smart.
Were you that in tune with politics at the same age? No.
When I was, so you're year 8?
Year 8.
So you're 13?
13.
Yeah. So by the time I was 17, that's when I got interested in NCEA with John Morris and Trevor Millard and all the rest. That was the first time I paid any attention. I remember really distinctly, I don't know why I remember this, but it came on the radio that there was a guy called Michael Cullen, and my ears pricked up because I thought it was Christian Cullen. And then I found out it wasn't Christian Cullen, so I went and did something else. Like that's about how interested I was. Like, oh, it's an All Black. No, it's just who I later found out was the Minister of Finance. But
actually, I'm pretty good friends with Cully, the living one, Christian Cullen. He's very frugal with his money. He wouldn't be a bad finance minister, actually.
That's another thing that's happened since I was on your podcast. I met my hero. What a legend.
Really? Where did you meet him? The Paraparumu golf course?
No, well, it was a golf course. It was the Chasing the Fox annual thing I do, so celebrity raise money for golf thing. So that was awesome. Every time they do an All Black selection, I hope he's in. You don't know who this is, do you, Henry?
Unfortunately not.
Do you like rugby at all?
I'm not much of a rugby person, but I'll watch the Warriors and the Blues with my nan, and we'll watch the All Blacks if they're on.
If you just Google Christian Cullen's All Black tries, and then you'll love rugby.
It's a long highlights package. Hey, we're going to crack on, but maybe one last one from you, Henry. Okay. Since you've probably got more of a debate with the Deputy Prime Minister on this than what I do, what are your thoughts on the Treaty Principles Bill? Yeah,
so this was one of the more maybe controversial and infamous things I wanted to touch on. But as a young person, maybe my grasp on what you're trying to do with the bill is not as strong as someone a little bit older than me. So how would you describe the Treaty Principles Bill to someone like me? And how would it change how the Treaty of Waitangi affects our lawmaking in Parliament?
Well, based on your question, I think you probably understand it better than you think. But look, first of all, if you go back to the treaty itself, there's two versions. We take the Maori version because that's the convention, as you take the indigenous language. And it basically says that the government has the right to govern, that the government has an obligation to uphold tino rangatiratanga or self-determination over lands and properties and taonga for Maori people. And it says that all people have the same rights and duties. Then in 1975, the government said, or the Parliament at that time said, here's the Treaty of Waitangi Act. There are such things as the treaty principles. The Waitangi Tribunal's job is to work them out, and we therefore will leave you to it. Over the last 50 years since then, a version of the treaty has emerged which has said, okay, yes, the government has the right to govern, but actually it's in partnership with Maori, and those equal rights actually mean equal outcomes. Now, there's a couple of things about that. Number one, if we are seriously saying that the treaty is a partnership between races, and that's literally what the Court of Appeal said, they also said that it formed a relationship, quote, akin to a partnership. That means that forever and a day, New Zealand is bound to be two groups of people. And your role in society, do I get consulted on this resource management project, for example? Do I get put on this government board, etc., ends up being decided by this treaty partnership. If you're in the tangata whenua, maybe you are in. If you're a tangata tiriti, then you're kind of a guest. Secondly, when it comes to the equity part, we end up trying to work out for healthcare and education, everything is about take Maori as one group and non-Maori as another group and work out statistically if they're the same. Now, I just make the point that is a society which is entirely based on, number one, what's your ancestral background, and number two, then we'll think about everything else. And I don't believe that a society can succeed when it tries to divide people like that. So my Treaty Principles Bill took those principles and said, well, number one, the government has the right to govern, the Parliament has the exclusive right to make laws. That's not too controversial, but some people actually think that sovereignty was never ceded and therefore there should be two parliaments or whatever, but there's got to be one parliament, it's got to be one law as far as I'm concerned. Number two, that people should have tiro rangatiratanga and property rights, But I said, and some people will, argue about this. I said it should actually apply to all people. If all people should have property rights, all people should have the right to self-determine and live their lives as they see fit. And number 3, there should be equal rights before the law. Not that there should be equal outcomes, equal rights. So I took the treaty and what I believe the treaty really was intended and what it meant in 1840, and I put that into a set of principles I think would be good for New Zealand. But obviously there's a lot of people who like the partnership idea, partly because it makes them special, or because they feel that they're guilty because of things that happened in the past, and therefore there should be different treatment of people. For that reason it created a lot of controversy. I still think in the long term that version of the treaty will prevail because division doesn't work.
Okay. So you said that everyone should have equal rights before the law, but after the law there shouldn't be equal outcomes. So could you elaborate what that meant? Because 60% of our prison population is Maori, and that means 20% of 900,000 Maori are in prison, which is kind of sad.
Well, you also got to remember, I'm not quite sure about your 20% of 900,000.
Sorry, that was
yeah, 2% might be, but the putting that aside, the other thing you got to remember is that Maori are also disproportionately victims of crime. So it's not that Maori are locked up more because there's some sort of prejudice. It's because there seems to be more crime. Now, you've got to get to the bottom of why that is. And the case I would make is that you can either look at people through a lens of what's their ethnic background and just say, well, that's it. We're just going to divide people. You're Maori or you're non-Maori. That's as far as our statistics go. Or you can look at a whole lot of other statistics. And you can ask yourself, for example, are people rich or poor? Do they live in town or country? What level of education do they have? The more you do this, the more you start to realise that there's a whole lot of Maori people who are actually doing really well and don't actually need a lot of help. And why should we? I mean, I would count myself as one of them. There are a lot of non-Maori people, conversely, who are really badly off and are in prison. There's still more poor non-Maori than poor Maori in absolute numbers. So you've got to have an answer to help that sector of the society as well. And so I would just argue that if you do good statistics, then you can start to address those problems. Whereas if your only answer is Maori versus non-Maori, then you end up grouping people and say, well, lots of Maori in prison, but also lots of Maori are victims of crime, so, whatever. I don't think that's a good outcome.
Cool. If I could ask one more question.
Yeah.
One more.
Just
He's a hijacker, isn't he?
Just one more. But I wanted to ask you a bit about one of your best bills, which was the end-of-life choice bill that you put through. Was it 2019 or 2020?
Well, the bill passed in 2019. The referendum was in 2020.
Okay. I thought that was really great. But could you run me through the process of how you took a bill like that was previously rejected and then managed to push it through Parliament?
Well, it was a slightly different bill, but really the reason for the difference was that the times changed. The previous bill was narrowly defeated in 2005. By about another 12, 13 years later, a lot had changed. More people had experienced bad death. Lucretia Seals, who I don't know if you know that name, but she was a very smart lawyer who had a terrible brain cancer. And the thing about these brain cancers is normally if you have a cancer and you're in pain, they give you some sort of opioid to try and dull the pain. But if the pain is in your brain, then by the time you've dulled the pain, you've also knocked yourself out. So she couldn't be helped any other way. She went to court. She asked, can I have my doctor in my life? The judge said, no, only Parliament can make that law. And I looked at that and I thought, gee, well, I'm in Parliament. Maybe I should try and help. Anyway, her then husband Matt and I and a bunch of others launched a campaign, but I think in many ways Lucretia Seals made it possible, along with a whole bunch of other experiences that people had. And by the time I did it, it was just a different time. There was more support and it was easier to get done. It still wasn't easy. Well, it was easier. It was still very hard. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Oh, thanks, Henry. It's a real pleasure. You are a thoughtful guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, Henry, what do you want to do? Just throwing it to you for a second, what do you want to do when you leave school? Have you thought much about that?
Well, as a person at a young age, I think there's a lot of things that I would have to look at because there are so many different career paths that I could take. Politics is definitely one of them, but there are still a lot of things that could be linked with politics or some other things entirely, like I could be a lawyer or I could be an author. There are just so many things to consider, but I think hopefully the more I go through school and the more I learn and the more opportunities I have, the more I'll get closer to deciding what I actually want to do.
Yeah. Well, take your time. Don't let anyone rush you.
During that interview, I was thinking, from my perspective, you'd be a great journalist, but please don't do that. You're too good for that, okay? Don't settle.
All right.
Hey, really cool to have you in here today.
Thank you.
Henry
Thanks
Blakeman.
for having me.
Appreciate you coming in, mate.
Nice to meet you, Henry.
Nice to meet you, David.
How was that?
Wow. Kind of wonder what you're doing when you're 13, right? But no, it was cool. I hope I didn't go on too much.
No, like he's genuinely smart. Like he had some bullet points there, but a lot of it was just him reacting to what you were saying. So, I mean, it's obvious I didn't set him up. He's just a really, really smart kid.
Look, a lot of journalists accidentally leave their notes in full view, but it didn't help me this time because he was actually freewheeling most of it.
Yeah.